right, excellent. Well, next is Arron, aka Student Seagull of IDS Research.
Alright, boys, how am I? Come in, red team, come in, red team. Yeah, we're live. How you doing, guys? Wow, we're busy today. So I'm going to talk to you about context awareness. I'm actually going to talk to you about a lot of things today. First and foremost, thank you for inviting me back this year. I'm honoured to be back at GrrCON for the second time. What an awesome conference. All of those in the yellow, you should go and pat on the back and say thank you, they're doing great work. Also, I've been asked to tell you, how many of you guys have seen the special GrrCON coins? They have coins, special GrrCON collector's edition. Now, to get one of these, you need to find one of the girls in the yellow tops, one of the yellow GrrCON tops, and you need to give them your best T-Rex impression. You get a chance to get one of these, which is pretty cool. So enough about me, well, about this, and let's talk about my talk. I do warn you that I come from a place called Dundee in Scotland, which means that I have very robust language, I think is the best way of explaining it. Basically, Scots swear every time they exhale. So consider this not safe for work. If you're easily offended, doors that way. So, in that nature, I'm going to start off with this. This is a quote by an unsigned UK hip-hop artist. And it basically goes, some flies in the back of the head, some are blind so it has to be said. If you think you'll just get by having respect, well, this is your reality check. And what this is, why I thought this was important to start off with this, is that organisations tend to think if they're big, they're immune to attack. They try to get by having respect. Well, I'm here to tell you that, ladies and gentlemen, is the biggest pile of crap going. So, what to expect from me today? Maybe a little bit of ranting. Hopefully, you'll get to be able to use the word context without feeling dirty. Might be able to use the words like attribution without feeling dirty. I certainly am going to talk about the kill chain, and I will feel dirty about that. And this may be a little bit of therapy for an angry IDS geek. So, for the record, I'm an independent IDS researcher, which is a fancy way of saying that I do not work for a vendor. I'm not here to sell you context awareness, okay? I am here to talk about what's going to happen in the future if we let the IDS vendors take control of the word context. And the reason that I'm passionate about this is how many of you have heard of the kill chain? Right. How many of you feel that that's a dirty word now? Cyber kill chain. Yay. Thank you, because the problem with that is we really need technology like that. We really need to understand detection like that. And now, I sound like a vendor because I use the term kill chain. So, hopefully by the end of the day, you'll not think any less of me. So who am I? As I said earlier on, I'm a security researcher, consultant, founder of Alpha 13 Research Labs, which my lovely colleague, I think here, is a part of. I'm one of these very, very sad individuals that concentrates on detection. Okay, this is the sort of stuff that I'm really inspired by. Detection is a very, very complex beast. It's not easy to detect things. This is why we spend lots and lots of money on useless devices. Yeah, I said useless. I keep on getting told that the IPS is dead. I'm sure we've all heard next gen and all those wonderful terms as well. But IPS is dead. Gartner in 2010, and I'm picking on 2010 for a particular reason. Gartner in 2010 stated the standalone IPS market, okay, nothing else, just standalone IPS products, $989 million. 2 million short of $1 billion. Why are you banging on about 2010 things? 2010 is the beginning of the world, the financial crisis. In Europe, we bailed out 2 European countries in 2010, Greece and Ireland. We still found $1 billion for standalone IPS products. IPS, in some of these other reports, there's a talk from probably the best IDS researcher I've ever met. I've not met him personally, but I was there at his talks. There's a guy called Johnny Flynn. He works for Facebook. Surprisingly, Facebook are very good at detecting threats. Who's seen that coming? They handle more information than any state would be holding. They have lots of sensitive information, and of course they're very, very interested in being attacked. So he did a talk at Hashtag, which is a conference held in Switzerland. It is no more. They're changing their name to Area 41, and they're going to be based in Zurich now, but it's still all the same cool people from Hashtag. So watch out for that. He did a talk called Detection Along the Kill Chain. He did some really good research. Some of his research basically went through the Gartner reports and said that breaches basically take from months to years to be detected, right? In places where they have an intrusion detection system. Ladies and gentlemen, includes in the name. That's its job. So, he had a look at it through, and out of these breaches that were detected with months and years between them, how do you think the most popular way of discovering a breach was? My system's running a little bit funny. Can you have a look at it? That's the main reason of discovering breaches for most of the Gartner and Verizon people. My computer isn't running its way normal. That's the problem. It feels a little bit iffy. So basically, the bad smell factor is what's detecting breaches in nearly 50% of the cases. Not the $2.6 billion industry selling products. A lot of it is third-party actors contacting them, telling them they've been breached. What do I mean by that? I mean your bank calling you up and saying, hey, where did you transfer $500,000 to the Malaysian bank account? You know, that's the next big factor in detection. We still haven't talked about IPS yet. That is everywhere. Here's a really scary fact for you. What factors higher in detecting breaches than an IPS device? Random log review detects breaches more reliably than intrusion detection systems. I will put that into context. Random dude, randomly looking, randomly at logs, is more effective than billion-dollar industry, right? IDS is dead though, don't forget that. They're still selling them. I was reading a report that reckons that the standalone IPS market will be nearly 2 billion, probably be looking at 5 billion by the end of 2015, okay? So we're not talking chump change anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking serious coinage, serious money. People are retiring. If you don't think that the industry is making money, 2 IPS vendors were brought this year. Do you guys know who they were? You know the famous one, don't you? SourceFire. $2.6 billion Cisco purchased for them.
2.7.
2.7. You might want to go, this would be a bit painful.
Actually, we're pretty good at this stuff.
Yeah. The Cisco purchasing of SourceFire is interesting. I'm not going to buy what Cisco says about we're going to leave SourceFire, we're not going to tamper with them. Because Cisco doesn't have a track record that establishes that. They do like companies and products, and they do tamper with them. Cisco is a really good way of getting really good products and closing them down. Mars for stars. Personally, why I think the Cisco purchase is interesting, I'll talk about in a little while. The other one, which really factors as chump change when you listen to the SourceFire purchase, was, I believe, McAfee purchased StoneSoft for around 200 million euros. Doesn't sound much now, does it, in comparison? I'm not a big fan of Stonesoft, to be honest with you. I'm sure that's been well documented when you've seen me speak before. Yeah. Stonesoft weren't always an IPS vendor. It's pretty hard to call them an IPS vendor, to be fair. They started off doing AV equipment and fireworks. Because obviously those two industries sit side by side. I'm not talking antivirus, I'm talking audio visual. Then they finally moved into IPS. And that is that lovingly term I would call a next-gen firewall. But they get purchased from McAfee. And they got purchased before SourceFire. So why am I really giving this talk? Well, some of this stuff really needs to be said. Okay? I have an argument. I had my Kanye West moment with a researcher from Stonesoft. And yeah, I'm going to let you finish in a minute. I know, I'm a dick, but some stuff had to be said. Gavin was there, I think he found it quite entertaining. But I swear to God, when I started asking him about the stuff that they put out there, his response to me was, I'm a victim of Stonesoft's marketing machine. Really? You put it out there, you tell us that this is it, I call you on it, and I'm the victim. I don't think that that's right. I robustly explained my case to why I don't think that was right. But sometimes stuff has to be said. It's not to pick on vendors, but it has to be said because I've been involved in trying to write testing methodologies for IPS and IDS for a little while now. And the fact of the matter is that there is a mix-up in the way that we communicate with our suppliers, or our suppliers communicate with us, whichever way you want to look at that. Okay? How many of you have had to purchase an IPS? Stick your hands up. These are the people you want to go speak to later on. How many times did you actually get the information out of the vendor that you were looking for? You know, the dirty word that I'm about to say, what detection rates can I expect? You want to ask a vendor that. And I can guarantee you what it is. The answer you'll get back is, well, it depends on the type of threats. And my answer to that is, well, I'm only interested in the nasty ones. The malicious threats, the ones with the evil packet. No. Detection rates is detection rates. I was very naive when we started doing this stuff. That I thought that maybe we could have a open source leaderboard of detection rates from vendors. Okay? And that sounds cool. That sounds like a really good idea. But the reality of it is, it's the worst possible way of dealing with this problem. Right? Because you know what? You cannot get a global detection rate. Okay, because there's too many factors involved. So when I talk about detection rates, I really am talking about an individual's organization's detection rates. And they do. Just look at NSS lab reports. You know, the clue is in the name. Out of 100 threats, how many would you expect your device to detect? You would hope it detects 100%. We all know that's not true, though. If you're interested in getting hold of me, here's my contact details, by the way. So, I'm going to talk about the cyber kill chain. I was woefully disheartened that it was not a chain that killed all cyber. But it is what it is. The cyber kill chain, how many of you actually know what the kill chain is? You've heard it, but wow, cool. So this is like 5 more than normal. Okay, it's normally like one person, and it's like, hey, you've worked in the military before? Yes, or I've got a big vendor. Cyber kill chain. For those that don't know, the kill chain is developed by the American military, I believe. And it's kind of logistics, right? Kind of understanding the logics of killing someone. Okay, clues in the name. But a number of steps have to be taken for you to kill someone. Okay? You know, you need to find your target. You need to find your location. You need to get guns. You need to get ammunition. You need to get your troops on the ground. There is a number of places where a chain of things has to happen for someone to get killed. And what the American military worked out is, you see these links in the chain? If you smooth those down, we get a little bit more effective. But ever being clever, they also worked out that the kill chain is a very good way of defending yourself. Because we all have enemies. We're in the Western world now. But there are certain things that our enemies have to take to do to attack us. They have to find us. They have to have weapons. They have to be on the ground with a gun. There is a number of places in the chain. And what the military worked out is that if you attack those parts of the chain, if I stop you from getting guns, you can't kill me. I know it sounds like I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but having this out in black and white makes a lot of sense. Lockheed Martin, have a look at this. They said, this is a really interesting way of detection. Why are you talking about the kill chain? Well, I personally find this a good way of adding context into things. So, take an attack against you. There's a number of things that are cyber attack. You know, the big dangerous one. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced cyber attacks, because apparently we've had cyber 9/11, cyber Katrina. I don't remember being around when these things happened, but I remember September the 11th and 3,000 people dying. When I saw cyber 9/11, not one life was lost. We tend to use these great visual memories of pain and war and so on and so forth. Add cyber in front of it, and we're experiencing this day, right? So, when someone tries to attack us, cyber, there is a number of steps that they have to take. Okay? The command and control center, exploits, targets, intel, so on and so forth. These all give off some type of signal. You know, the registering of command and control domains. Maybe it's a very good way of detecting the prelude to cyber war. Who would have seen that coming? So, Lockheed Martin very proud of themselves. Trademark the term cyber kill chain. And now, we get the shove down our throat constantly. I was speaking to a vendor coming into the IPS market, and I was having the kill chain rant about how, God, you can pretty much tell this organization, that organization's marketing strategy because it is kill chain this, kill chain this, kill chain this, detection on the kill chain, kill chain, kill chain, kill chain. TM, TM, TM. He turned around to me and said, you pretty much just described our marketing strategy. I wasn't even talking about that company. I didn't even know there were certain products at that time. So the industry, the IDS industry, likes to have terms. I'm sure you've all heard them. IDS, IPS, UTM. See, they're all there. Next gen, anomaly detection. We'll talk about that for a while too. The problem is, if anyone noticed the talk title, what's context got to do with it? It's a play on theme term songs, I'm sure you all guessed. Now, I am not belittling domestic violence with this, but I want to talk about an interesting incident that happened to Tina Turner with Ike. It's called the Cape incident. Any of you guys ever heard of this incident before? Okay. To me, this is the IDS industry. So Ike decided that he would sit Tina down and make her eat a whole cake. Well, it doesn't sound too bad, does it? But she wasn't hungry. But she had to take the first couple of mouthfuls, swallowed it down okay. But then when she keeps on getting to bits and more of the cake, she starts to feel sick and sick and sick. And this is like a pivotal moment for her. Because this is emotional attack now. Not just a black eye, but forcing control on someone. Well, we do this in the IDS industry. We take terms like kill chain and force it down your throat. Right? We take terms like next gen I'm sure you all are pissed off at hearing those terms. You know, you all have experience of this. We do it with cyber, and we've done it with apt. There's some interesting stuff that I've seen with the apt. Does anyone remember when Marketing Online Spike basically broke SSL? Right? Beautiful bit of research. Honestly, I'm a big fan of Mark's. You know, I've interviewed him a few times for the podcast and everything as well. He's a great guy. The year afterwards, in Vegas, there was a vendor with a board that said, defends you against all known Moxie attacks. All known Moxie attacks. I'm sure Moxie would be over the moon now that he's an IDS vendor slogan. But this is the problem, that we find that we have this with apps. We're going to have this with Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. We're going to have this internal anomaly detection. I've already seen literature from some vendors talking about how they could have detected the Snowden situation. Really? What sort of information do you have in your logs that can detect? What algorithm are you using to detect a whistleblower? How does that work? You know, surely prison is a better place to work out that he was a whistleblower. By the way, the reason that we don't have Skynet, ladies and gentlemen, is we've been too busy trying to read other people's emails. That all the resources have been focused with prison. So I personally would like to thank the NSA, because at least we don't have the cyber overlords, and we don't. John Connor is safe. Yeah, feel free to talk to John Connor. Sky, let's go. But yeah, if we look at the Terminator movies, I was thinking about this the other day, and if we look at how the apocalypse starts in the third movie, basically Skynet social engineers the US government. It puts out a fake virus that it controls and then talks the American military into plugging it into the world. Boom! Skynet. So, just be careful, because even cyborgs can social engineer. But we do this, the cake incident is something that we do in IPS. We stuff terms down your throat. Okay? It is bad. But what do I mean by context? Well, the interesting thing about context is it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Surprisingly, it has context. It's not one of these things that you can just pick. I can't put a picture on the board and say, this is the context of it. Because it has meaning to each individual. But you bet your ass you're about to have context awareness shoved down your throat. Okay? If you haven't already been experiencing it, it is coming. Okay? And I'm sorry to do this to the one person in the audience that I know from SourceFire there, but Cisco definitely are interested in context awareness, and that's why I predominantly think they're very interested in having SourceFire, because you're talking about two vendors that are very well known for selling context awareness products. More so, Cisco, I think, did a skills purchase. That's what I think Cisco did. You know, Cisco is a top-tier IPS vendor, wherever way you write that up. They brought another IPS vendor. What, do you think that they needed some, like, SourceFire boxes? You know, they don't have the products for that or something. That is about bringing in skills to come along the lines with their product ranges. You now have the two biggest vendors that talk about context awareness playing for the same team. Okay? You're going to get this shot down your throat. But the problem is we need context awareness. We need to understand context. We cannot detect without context. When we try and detect without context, we call that false positives, because that's pretty much what's about to happen. Okay? Let's run through some scenarios. So you set up the IPS, and I want it to wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning if I'm going to be attacked. I want to know about that. That's important. You know, in the days of pages, we're not doing that anymore, but, you know, mobile phones, getting a lot on your phone. Beep, 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 beep. Quick set of fire trucks. We've got cyber danger. So, let's run through this scenario. You don't want to really be woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning because a blank user agent string was used on your internal network. Right? That's interesting, but not one of these things that I'm going to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and send a fire truck. Okay? Also, the problem with that sort of alert is there's no real meaning. The reason I pick on the blank user agent string is it used to be indicative of malware, of the sending out of data. Well, you know, also, there are some products, end user products, not security products, I mean stuff like Fitbit, that contacts back home and sends stats up, that, surprise, surprise, has a blank user agent string. So that's why you don't really want to be working on at 4 o'clock in the morning, because you don't bloody know what it is doing. But you might get another alert that says, hey, why are you doing domain name resolution for a Chinese IP address from the internal network? That might not be, that's an interesting bit of information, but not necessarily wanting to get woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Send out the cyber fire trucks. Or maybe you get another alert that you are downloading a data block from an unknown location. There could be a number of reasons why that's happening, but you might not want to be woken up for that. But you sure as hell probably are wanting to be woken up when you put all of those three things together. Because that might be very indicative of a compromise starting to take place. As I've said earlier on, random log review is more successful at picking up intrusions. That's the God's honest truth of it. I'm not lying to you. The facts and figures speak for themselves. This is not to say that IDX is bad. It's just that it tries to do all things for all people and is a master of none. So when I talk about context, what I'm talking about is not the blank user agent string, is not the download of the data block, it's not the DNS lookup for a Chinese IP address that we know to be a command and control center. Okay? It's the glue that puts all of those together. The bit that makes you go, I've got a gut feeling that that's bad. Now, how on earth can you ask a product to have a gut feeling? You cannot get rid of the human eyeball in detection, right? I, much like many other IPS researchers, before me and probably not and after me, will start off with this idea about what we really want to do is kind of factor out the human element, right? Machine learning, anomaly detection. You know, it's reliable, it's the machine, it doesn't need to sleep, da 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 da. But the problem is, an IPS doesn't have a gut feeling. And a lot of detection is about, remember half those breaches that I discussed earlier on being detected was, oh, my computer just doesn't seem right. You know, how do you get a product to have a feeling? You can't. But context is all about what something feels like. And I'm not sure how you can express it. You know, but how long you possible is because we're here at this situation now that we're having context awareness. Right? You are being talked about it. You're already pissed off with next gen, cyber kill chain, apt, and all these other little abbreviations that sell boxes. Okay? What on earth do you think is going to happen with context awareness? Do you think they're just going to leave that be? They're going to shove that down your throat? I hate to be the messenger of war, but trust me, if they've done that with the cyber kill chain, you're getting a context awareness. But the problem is that the kill chain is a really effective way for us to understand attacks and detection. And the fact that we've lost that without looking like some cheap used car salesman trying to sell you, yeah, I've got some security products, well, you know what I mean? I've got something new, yeah? But that's how it comes across now. Yeah, I've got good, bad, and cyber kill chain, we love it. You know, but that's what's getting shoved down our throats. They're going to take it away from us. But the problem is you need to talk about it. If you're going to do detection properly and not be woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning with blank user agent strings, then you need to start talking about context. And you know what? I'm going to start using another dirty word. You're going to hear it a lot more from IPS vendors soon. Attribution. Surprise, surprise. You cannot talk about context without attribution. Right? Attribution is putting meaning onto something, giving it an owner. You know, I attribute that command and control center to Chinese underground hackers. I attribute that exploit code to Russian forums. The attribution requires you to place something somewhere and give it to someone, an ownership model. But in the end, we're going to lose that term as well. Because how many of you have heard attribution used in security products so far? Yeah? And no one's actually really talking about it properly. Yeah, we do some attribution. Great, this is that secret sauce that we sort of get used to now. So, if you're going to talk about context, you need to start talking about attribution. Okay? Because how do you give something meaning if the person doing it is unknown? Okay? Attribution can be as simple as this is coming from an unknown attacker, but you have to give it meaning. And to do that, you need to attribute it to something. You know what comes first, the attribution or the context? You know, it's a chicken and egg situation, but trust me, this is going to be played out more and more. Context awareness anomaly detection systems. I'm not making this shit up. I don't have like a buzzword generator at home. Right? These are coming off papers from vendors. So, my definition of context awareness is finding normality in the data that you're sent. We don't need more alerts, we need more meaning. So ultimately, what this is actually saying is normal, abnormal detection. Great. You really need to put a 2.0 in there and a cyber, and if you've got a spare kill chain, throw it in there as well, because you've made the full house. And it's there. A good example of context awareness detection is probably anti-fraud systems. At banks. They're very, very good at detecting fraud, surprisingly. Apart from when it happens to you, of course, then they're really shit at it. But they are notifying people of breaches. Your bank is telling your supplier, hey, why is there everyone that's used a credit card with you? It's just run up £1,000. Would you like to explain that? Ooh, we have a breach. Thank you for letting us know. But what about the context-aware anomaly detection? Well, they didn't see it. Anomaly detection, while I'm at it as well. Anomaly detection systems. Right. How many of you were here last year when this spoke? Do you guys remember me ranting about anomaly detection? Did I rant about it? I'll try and be quick this time. But it's a great story that my old boss, one of the most, I think I'm cynical, and just put Padawan to this man's dark force. The most cynical man I have ever met. Love him to bits. So, he had a anomaly detection author working on his new product. And he speaks to my boss about it. He says, what do you think about anomaly detection? Because that's the future. And my boss is like, well, let's back up. What on earth is anomaly detection? He knew what anomaly detection was. He just think, okay. Well, the anomaly detection is when we look for stuff that's abnormal on the network, and then we let you know that something's bad. The great thing about anomaly detection is it does not need any signatures. Really. That's a chicken and egg scenario as well, and I'll explain why in a minute. Right? So, he said, back up. What does normal mean? How do you work out what's normal? How does a computer give context at normal? I mean, Jesus Christ, I asked you what normal was. None of you could give me a unified answer. So he says, you know, we drop it on the lab, we drop it on the network, and then when something changes, we set an alert. Great, okay. So when I drop it on my virus backdoor network, you're going to alert me when the backdoor stops working, because that's abnormal. Well, yeah, I mean, that could happen. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Because it's what's different on the network. But you presume that the network's clean. Really? I don't think so. If you find a clean network, I'll find you someone with install disks who's just finished a long shift. But the reality of it is, the anomaly detection system is trying to work out what normal is. Well, Jesus Christ, I swear to God, if I got you, maybe you should all come up to me later on today at some point and tell me what you think normal is. And I bet you that not one of you will say the same thing. And if you do, you've been in it together. Okay? I've got my fraud detection working as well. But back to the main thread of this, though. So how many of you have been bought with anomaly detection? That's another product range we're seeing coming out, pushed out. It's not already been pushed out. But it's about language now. Okay? It's about being able to speak, strangely enough. I've spoken to a lot of people up and down the world about what it's like to buy products from vendors. Okay? And a lot of it is, I don't get the answers to the questions that I'm asking. Clues in the name, questions and answers. The language type. Sorry to do this again, but have we not noticed that the IPS vendors are like a cartel? I've said this for a long, long time. It's like IDS Fight Club. IPS Club, we'll call it. The first rule of IPS Club is, do not talk about detection rates. The second rule of IPS Club is, you don't talk about detection rates. They do not even fight each other on detection rates. It is about throughput. You know, it amazes me that you have competitors in the detection business that do not fight on detection. How crazy is that? That's like cars, fast sports cars, talking about their GPS systems and not how fast they go. Wow, am I the only one who thinks that's a little bit fucked up? Just a little. They don't fight each other on that, right? Anyone that's tried to communicate with a vendor has had to compromise on the information that they're after. Most people can tell me about throughput, how many simultaneous connections that we can hold, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you know what? I'm not buying a detection system for a fast network, right? If I wanted that, I'd just get a gold bit of string, like a gold bit of wire, right? I'm interested in detection. I had a friend call me up, and he basically says to me, you're not going to fucking believe what was just said to me. He said, as soon as he said this, I had to call you. And when he told me, I was like, you can tell this gentleman that he's made my slide deck. He actually hasn't, but he will in the future. He advised his client to turn on SSL to take the load off the IPS. So he advised his client to encrypt all the traffic and not let the IPS look at the traffic. Am I the only one that sits there and thinks, why don't you just fucking turn it off? Right? Why not save the power? Think green. So, I also blame PCI DSS as well for this. Look, I'm going to talk a little bit about OSNIP Top 5, which is a project that I talked about last year. We were a little bit more forward with it this year, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But invisible traffic, trust me, there's part of PCI that requires you to have a third-party application scanner. Yeah? But you're not allowed to break an SSL tunnel, because you wouldn't be PCI compliant. So how the fuck do you read the packets in the SSL tunnel? Because to read it, you break PCI, because you break, it's a man in the middle ultimately. So you have a compliancy that requires you to have a third-party detection system. You know what would make sense? If they also said, it requires you to have a detection rate of X amount. Okay? We require you to have a detection system so that you can detect threats. We don't require you to make it work. Really? Well, thank you for the ether. It's really nice. You've helped an industry not make people redundant. Well done. You know, you're doing your bit for the economy. Thank you. But this happens. I deal with conversations regularly about this. But the problem is that we've already lost the kill chain. Okay? I'm not the first person to say this. Okay? But you don't have to feel ashamed for using the term kill chain. Take it back. Right? It is not a trademark term. Well, it is. Fine. But I don't recognize it. Right? I know what the kill chain means, and that's what's important to me. Okay? But we're going to lose the battle of context. If we're not talking about context and detection, we're losing the battle. We're just managing alerts. We're not detecting anything. And if we're just managing alerts, then get more people randomly looking at logs, because you'll be safer. And that's the truth. So for us to do our jobs better, we can't lose context as a word. We can't have arcane incident with context. We can't let them take it away from us. Because if we do, we won't detect shit. We'll just be in shit. That's all that will happen. And who cares? Trust me. Speak to detection needs. Context is incredibly important. Because otherwise, it is just alert management. That's all it is. And we are going to lose it. So, you know, if some vendor or third-party supplier starts speaking to you about context, stop them and ask them to explain to you what actually is context. You have to tell me as an individual what context means to me, because that's what context ultimately means. You cannot see it in a marketing brochure. Okay? You can't discover the kill chain by reading it in a book. Okay? You can understand what happens, but the book isn't going to tell you who's trying to kill you. The book is not going to tell you who's trying to exploit you. Okay? So I'm going to talk about the OSNIP project. How many of you were here again last year? Okay, how many of you remember me talking about what we really need is an open source organization that is a bit like OWASP? And I kind of went up here and talked about it. Guess what? We have an open source organization a bit like OWASP now. Have you seen that coming? So OSNIF stands for the Open Source Network Intrusion Framework. The problem is that the reason that people don't trust IPS is because they can't test it, they can't verify it, they can't touch it. How do you know your IPS is working? A few false positives and a green flashing light. That's how you know it's on. You don't know what it's detecting. So maybe you finally have enough of that. And you say, let's actually do a test. Let's see how good it is. Let's see how effective its security posture is. Oh, cool. So how do we do the test? Well, you know what? We'll ask Google. Hey, Google, buddy, how do I test an IPS? Well, you want an Indian passport? You know, what do you mean an IPS? Even Google has a problem understanding what context is. You know, Indian passport service, blah, 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 blah. But there is no testing methodology. Yet, if I want to build a web application, I could literally trip over standards and testing methodologies. Development life cycles, secure development life cycles. The shit, that all works properly, doesn't it? I was having this argument recently about SSH. Because I'm a dude called Finnon, right? The kind of clues in the name and the sort of background that I come from, right? I used to be the student president of the University of Alberta's Linux Society. My surname is Finnon. We all see what happened. Okay? So, I come from an open source background. I've won awards in open source. One of the things that really annoys me is people turning around about many eyes and shallow box, or as I like to call it, bullshit. Our products are safe because it's open source. You can look at our code. Yes, you need to find someone to look at the code first. Right? Oh, open source, many eyes, shallow box, many eyes, shallow box. How many of you have run an open source project? How many of you actually get contributions? You know, after a long time, anyone that runs an open source project, but everyone can get involved and see what we're doing and working with the code. Yes, but everyone needs to be inspired and infused to do it. So, you have SSH. Designed from the ground up. Let's use another beautiful word, baked-in security. They baked in security, they didn't add on security. They started with an STL at the beginning. Cool. We review each line of code. Awesome. We also had a remote 0 day against our code base. Oh, but I thought you had an STL. Yeah. Thought you had every line of code looked at. Yeah. I thought you had many eyes and shallow bots. Yeah. What does that prove? That all software is lookable in the end. But just because something is open source doesn't mean it's more secure. So, but I digress a little bit here. So, when it comes to testing methodologies, you just don't have them for IPS. You have them for, you know, whatever software you want to write. You want to write an application, so on and so forth. You don't really have a testing methodology that isn't hidden behind a fucking paywall or some kind of vendor spin. Right? You don't have OWASP for IDS. IDS is older than web applications. It's been around for years. There's some dispute about how old it is. But the Common Intrusion Detection Framework paper on building detection systems, DARPA funded, 1972. We still don't have a testing methodology that you can download today. Okay, that's the truth of that. Okay. So OSNIF, as I said, is trying to be like OWASP, because, you know, for all the sins, OWASP does try and do good work, right? I'm glad that there is no OWASP. You know, some people are a bit pissed off because what having the standard ultimately does is make people test towards a standard rather than test an application. I'm sure many of you have experienced pen tests on your web applications that is just the glorified top 10. Say, hey, that really wasn't a web app test. You just made sure that I was OWASP compliant. But cool, because at least it's a start. So I talked about this, and I'm going to talk about how far we're with it. One of the things that I talked about is the top 5. Oh my god, you just slaved off the top 10, right? So one of the famous things of OWASP is the top 10. And regardless of what we think about it, it's still there. Okay? And it does a place that has a job. Okay? Some talk about it's not democratically chosen, blah, blah, blah. Right, okay, whatever. But I think we can all agree that looking in for injection attacks in web applications is a good place to start any type of test. You know, taking what's in there is a good thing. Well, we have the similar idea at OSNIF. So one of my friends said to me when I was doing this, I was fact-finding last year about it. One of my friends said to me, you know what's really cool about OWASP? It's the top 10. I said, yeah, we should really have something like that. Yeah, okay. Then my other friend said to me, you know what would be really cool? You should totally do 5%. I'll tell you half the times I'm part of the list. Clever. And right. The problem, the biggest criticism that you get of the top 10 is that it's not democratically chosen. Well, you know what? I can't fix that in OSNIF. What I can do is start with 5 and let it grow. So these 5 things are what a collection of IPS experts think that you should be looking at during an IPS test. Okay? Context doesn't feature in this part, but I did want to update people about where we are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what the top 5 is quickly. These are not weighted in importance, they're all important. But your detection system should be looking for protocol ambiguities. What's protocol ambiguities? Well, that's when the RFC is not crystal clear and you leave an implementer to make the decisions on. An example, TCP, IP, Unix, and Windows. They all handle things a little bit differently. Someone once said to me, well, an IPS needs to be like a web server. Well, no, IPS needs to be like all web servers, right? It needs to understand all the protocol ambiguities. The only way actively that you can probably defend against protocol ambiguities is using another term I'm sure you all love, protocol normalization, which means lots of different things to different people. But in a test, you should be looking for protocol ambiguities in your IPS. Because trust me, if it's not handling them properly, you might want to know them. Because you don't want a third party, state actor, cyber threat finding that out for you. False positives. We've never had a false positive. You ever had a true positive? No. In systems. Right? Anyone says to you they've never had a false positive, that's because the fucking thing's turned off all the network cables out there. Right? IPS systems have false positives. Suck it up, ladies and gentlemen. There is nothing that we can do. Right? Everything in life has a false positive. Right? Sometimes we get it wrong. But how we manage getting things wrong is what makes or breaks it. Learning from our mistakes. Met an organization, last year I talked about enumerating IPSs with false positives. So I stood up in the middle of my talk, the first time that's happened, and said, I think you have got it wrong. Really? Okay, well let's run with it. I think you woefully underestimate the issue. And what I was saying was that you probably use 30 to 60 PCAP files, we play them over a network, and how you respond to certain things will give me an indicator of what kind of protocol normalization you have in place, and so on and so forth. I think you have underestimated the issue. Because what I was saying was, how are you going to notice 30 or 40? He says, we deal with 25 to 50,000 false positives a day. 17 false positives a minute. How do you manage that? We don't. And that's the truth of that. How do you but let's talk about the business aspect of this. Let's just do some ballroom maths. One guy spends 2 hours a day filtering out false positives. He's not even really managing, let's be honest with you. He's just ticking boxes now, because it's a part of the workload. There is no chief operating officer of false positives. We don't give a position to manage this problem. Right? But let's take this guy that spends 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, 10 hours. Run with me, we'll do this for 4 weeks, 40 hours, and times it by 12. Then all of a sudden we have actual dollars. Then we replicate that across the board. But if you're a global organization, then you've got one guy in each of your global offices managing alerts, false positive alerts. There is a dollar sign for your company to get to the bottom of this, fix it. Okay? You're not going to totally fix false positives, but you are going to start saving money by getting rid of stupid rules like blank user agent strings, because there has no context in it. If you really want to piss off someone running emergent threats, change your user agent string to IE4, because apparently that's malware. Don't get me wrong, if someone was using IE4 on my network, I would probably want to know. Don't necessarily want to send a fire truck out at 4 o'clock in the morning, because someone's using a user agent string. So false positives are an important thing to keep a track of. Evasion techniques, evade all the things. You should be testing your IDS to make sure that it's capable of detecting evasion techniques. Evasion techniques, surprisingly, are bloody easy to detect. Who would have thought it? Doing something abnormal. I really, really enjoyed the advanced evasion technique, like bullshit we had to go through 2 years ago, which totally turned out to be, we took 2 old evasion techniques, we bolted them together and called it a new one. That's ultimately what it ended up to be. And when I said to them, have you ever read a paper called the Achilles heel of detection? No. Right, okay. Well, that says that the more you evade stuff, the more likely you are being detected. So, an example, DCE RPC fragmentation, TCP IP segmentation. Okay? By doing that, we now have 2 surfaces to detect. So your DCE RPC and your TCP IP. So you guys do really well against these advanced evasion techniques because your TCP preprocessors are fucking awesome. So they pick up the segmentation, no problems. So these attacks that have gone through, if they didn't try and be a little bit too clever. Who would have thought of it? Obfuscating your obfuscation makes you kind of weird. Who would have seen that? Evasion techniques are easy to find. Nicto, exploits, so on and so forth. Test your IDS system against them. Invisible traffic. I wish this issue would piss off, I really do. But it's not. I am fed up of intrusion detection systems placed between two encrypted endpoints. Right? Turn the thing off. If you're not using it, don't waste the time. But the problem is that people, there just isn't the information out there to help people make good decisions in purchase and deployment. If you want to scare a system admin, you tell them that they've got to deploy an IPS, that they've got to deploy an IPS. And then they go, shit. And a lot of things start to worry about, is it going to be in the right place? Has it got a right spread? Are the sensors going to pick up stuff? You know, is it going to be overworked? So on and so forth. You know, people misconfigure IPSs every single day. Shock horror, people misconfigure firewalls as well. It is what it is. But testing and making sure, I know it's not stupid. Detection rates, oh my God, he's talking about detection rates again. Someone has to. Right? You cannot get global detection rates. So you need to look at your organization and look at the types of attacks that you're likely to experience. Build a test, and then run that against your box. Okay? Even if it's poor barroom maths, it's something to start off with. These are the 100 threats that we think we're going to see. Our IPS picked up 25% of them. Shit. Okay, let's manage that risk. Let's get it right. We can work with that. So just to recap, those are the top 5. These are 5 things that you should really consider when you're doing an IPS test. I'm not saying that you have to do them. You know, it's all up to you. But I think you need to look at protocol ambiguities, invisible traffic, evasion techniques. I think these are important to factor in and build a detection rate that makes sense for your organization. Okay? I'm not going to talk about testing the load of an IPS. Okay? Because that's not really an easy thing for a pen tester. It's not like I'm going to turn up with a load balance and say, hey, there you go. I'm just going to plug this in here. Although that stuff's pretty interesting as well. A lot of this will handle 10,000 simultaneous connections. Yes, but actually how many of that was usable data, or is it just blank connections? Blank connections. So, if you want to find out what we're doing, we have a Google Groups page, a wiki, and that sort of stuff. Find us at hostnet.org. In context, you need to understand what context means for you, because it is important. Okay? Don't let your vendor tell you what context means. You tell your vendor what context means. Vendors are not bad people. I portray them badly, and I don't mean to. They're not bad people. They work in a very cutthroat environment where people make lots and lots of money and expect them to make lots and lots of money. But when you get hands-on with decent consultants from vendors, they will work with you. Right? Maybe not after you buy the product, but they will work with you. But get them to tell you, and you work out what actually context means. It's important for you to find out. Because without it, you're not detecting shit. You're just doing shit. My contact details again, I've run slightly over. All done. 2 minutes in, 2 minutes left. I will take any questions from you guys that you have now, or you can find me later on.
What documentation out there is on false positives versus the various systems?
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, I know where you're going with this, and it's not that. You know? Because that requires the vendors to say, okay, let's talk about our false positives. It was pretty hard to talk about false positives when you defend against all known afterthoughts. But by the way, we tend to trigger off on lots of different stuff. You know what I mean? So I think there's probably some position that maybe an organization like OWASP can say, we've spoken to our users, and they're saying to us, we'd really like to understand where you guys are at with false positives. But yeah, there is nothing.
That's the one frustration I had. I just pretty much left the room.
It is, you're not alone. False positive issue is I mean, it costs businesses money, but we don't admit that. My colleague later on in the future will be talking about the economics of false positives. Pardon? The economics of false positives, we'll be talking about that.
The end of next year?
The end of this year. Because it's an important thing for us to talk about. What does false positives actually cost us? You know, apart from us not valuing our advice anymore, without us worrying, without, we don't trust it anymore. Any more for any more? I would like to thank you all. You've been absolutely awesome. Please enjoy the rest of GrrCON. Remember, go and find the girls in the yellow tops, give them the best T-Rex impression. And hopefully I'll see you at the bar.